thank you so much for your time. You're here obviously at the 21st edition of the Glagow Film Festival for The Suffer.
Yeah.
I've seen the film. It's a movie very much about how a man descends, into madness when, pushed. What was it about the screenplay from Thomas Martin that really grabbed you?
Well, it was actually just a little outline that Tom sent me a few years ago that kind of grabbed me. It was like, I think it was 2 pages long, and it had just the setup for something that's really interesting in terms of it being, having the opportunity to do a film that could be very subjective from one character's point of view, and he goes through like a lot within a short period of time, and that we could transpose that story to Australia and do something in the vein of the new wave Australian films that we both love. So all those things, and just long conversations between me and Tom, just in general, just vibing on the kind of stuff that we were into. So yeah. I
get the impression it's one of those screenplays that when you pick it up, you need to read it start to finish.
Yeah, it had a lovely pace actually. Yeah, of just everything just piling on top of this guy one after another. Which has an element of comedy to it as well. For me, it was like, poor dude, but funny as well.
Yeah, I love that scene with the payphone.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot. Also filmed in Western Australia.
Western Australia, yeah.
What was that shoot like? Was it quite challenging?
It was great in a lot of ways and challenging in other ways. There's not that many crew in Western Australia compared to Eastern Australia, which bring a lot of people and equipment into Western Australia. But then the people we did get from Western Australia were great. And it's quite remote, which is great because you're sort of, once I found that location, we looked at like loads of beaches all the way up and down the coast. That was the last place we found. It's about 3 hours south of Perth, a little town called Yallingup, and it just had all of the elements for the staging of the film in that actual place, rather than us having to kind of shoot a little bit here and then go over somewhere else to do another scene, or down the road to do something else. So it was all, we were able to visit the set, there was 5 minutes from where we were staying, and just like walk through it on the weekends and block everything and figure it out.
Were the locals quite friendly?
They actually were, yeah. I was kind of hoping, to meet someone who'd like push me out of the way or something. But every morning it's like, "G'day, mate." Yeah.
Did you guys get a chance to hit water? Obviously, most times shoots are quite tight, time's limited. Who's the best surfer out of the cast and crew?
Well, yeah. Well, then we had loads of like amazing surfers actually on our crew, but like from Australia, the ADs and all that were like practically pro. But Rosniak, the DOP, had done a little bit of surfing in Morocco, and he went out a little bit and tried to teach me. We just got thrown around, really smashed up in the water. And we're also conscious of sharks there, because there are a lot of great whites and they do eat people. It's actually on the rise. So like once you start thinking about that, it's like, ugh. You could just, especially with the water, it's kind of, if you're not going for out until like it's kind of dusky, you can't really, and that's also when they feed. But yeah, it was. I actually went fishing quite a bit
nice.
On the my time off, just to kind of go zen and clear my mind.
Yeah, you don't want a real life Jaws thing happening. You're trying to work and make something. That vast scenery, that the vast coastline. But the film still feels intimate. You and Rosniak have been able to create that. How much of a challenge was it to have that in the film, where the focus is not the background and scenery and everything else that's going on?
Yeah, I mean that was what was interesting in terms of like a challenge, was to do this kind of subjective film in this more or less one location, even though it's a big location. It was all kind of contained within that space, and really using the elements that are there, and then adding to those elements with our own stuff, with the art department and color palette and all that kind of thing, to create this sort of a place that gets more intense as the film goes on, with the heat and the oppression also the violence kind of bubbling up and all of that. So yeah, it was good fun. But we shot with 2 cameras mostly, not kind of cross shooting, but we had another cinematographer, actually a local guy, Tim, who did a lot of kind of detail stuff, just like on hands and things like that. So we were able to kind of create this weird world using long lenses and super wide angle lenses and a mix.
You got a great cast, Nicolas Cage, Julian McMahon, but for me, I think Nic Cassim.
Yeah,
it really stood out.
He's brilliant.
Not to be disrespectful or anything. I thought he really stood out for me. What did these actors bring to the role that maybe surprised you that you weren't expecting?
Well, with Nick, I saw him in Mr. In Between. Have you ever seen that show?
Never seen it.
Right, Justin Rosniak is in that as well. Who plays the cop. It's a brilliant show, and he played a character in that where he was. I just thought his performance was amazing. So we asked him would he tape for the Bum, and a good few people did actually. Like, I don't know, probably had like 50 or 60 self tapes, and his was just really real, And he went off and did a lot of research himself, like watching people, who had a little bit of suffered a little bit with mental illness and homelessness, or were affected by trauma, and how they would move and look up to the sun and then sort of mutter to themselves and all that kind of stuff. He brought to it, and I thought he gave an amazing performance. Yeah, and he grew his beard out, and I asked him to keep his ear hair and nasal hair and everything to grow out his fingernails, and he did, and I think it really kind of added to the character.
The sort of look that when he goes to the premiere and he's maybe clean cut, people wouldn't recognise him. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. The makeup artist as well did an amazing job, I think, of giving all of the actors actually this tan that it looks a little bit crazy when you see them in person, but on camera it just really adds to the texture and the vibe of the film.
You've got obviously Nicolas Cage, doing some, I suppose, Nicolas Cage things in the film. It was a challenge for you, I suppose, trying to harness his energy, to make sure he wasn't given too much, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that we talked about in advance of shooting, and he had ideas as well about when, stages throughout the film, like his own character arc, like at what point his voice would start changing, when he would start limping, and then didn't want to be having too limpy the whole way through the movie either after he cuts his foot, and so a lot of it was we talked about how we're going to modulate that throughout, and at what point to really kind of, also for the audience to get satisfaction from certain moments where he snaps, so a lot of that was pre-planned, and then we rolled with it, and it was pretty smooth.
That chemistry between Nicolas and Julian, that tension, that heat. How much freedom did they have, to push each other's buttons, beyond the script? We blocked out that scene. That was the first day Julian was on set. We shot the scene where Julian's character was offering him food at the car and holding his face and everything. So they had never met before, and so that was the first time meeting. And Nick's character had already been through a lot in the film at that point. So his voice had started to change at that stage. So that was where we were going. Is this going to work as a kind of the chemistry between them work? And we I think we spent most of the day shooting that scene, and I thought it was great in the end. The way he touches them, and it's slightly homoerotic in a weird way as well, and Nick's character almost wants to be the Scally character, and the Scally character is, and Nick's such a powerful performer that Julian had to kind of dominate him in that scene. And he's slightly taller, so I thought it worked great. Just one final question. In terms of your next project, what you're working on, is it going to be something else in the sun? Or are you going to try and go to a different location? Have you got a bucket list of locations?
Well, yeah. After doing that film, I was saying to the writers I work with, you know, we should really just think about like go somewhere nice, make a film. But no, I'm working on a film called Goliath at the moment. That's we're planning on shooting in northern Greece, up near the border to Albania. Amazing location for the story. But and then yeah, the different it really just depends on the project, you know, where we're going to shoot them. Yeah, trying to find the best place for the story.
Basically, every writer that sets it in Hawaii or somewhere.
Oh yeah, I know.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with films release.
Thanks. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey, you guys!
Hey you guys.
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey you guys.
Hey, you guys!